So, have you ever wondered what happens to a company's finances when the very money it uses is, well, fundamentally broken? What happens when inflation spirals so completely out of control that last month's profit is basically worthless today? Well, that's the fascinating and kind of chaotic world of hyperinflationary accounting, and we're going to make sense of it together.
Okay, imagine this. You're trying to measure a room, but your ruler shrinks every single day. One day it's a meter long, the next it's 90 centimeters, the day after that it's 50. I mean, your measurements would be completely useless, right? That is exactly what hyperinflation does to money. It just completely destroys its ability to be a stable measure of value.
And look, this isn't just some theoretical problem. The official accounting standards are crystal clear about this. As you can see right here from International Accounting Standard 29, or IAS 29, financial reports in a hyperinflationary economy are considered, and I quote, not useful without some serious adjustments. And that is precisely why this special rulebook even exists.
So here's our game plan. We're going to break it all down. First, we'll get a handle on what hyperinflation really means for money. Then, we'll dig into the rulebook itself, IAS 29. After that, we'll see how the numbers actually get adjusted, uncover this really fascinating idea called the inflation gain or loss, and finally, wrap it all up by seeing why any of this really matters.
All right, Section 1. Let's be really clear here. Hyperinflation is not just high inflation. Nope, it's a complete, catastrophic failure of a currency's most basic job, which is to store value. We're talking about a full-on economic crisis.
So the official definition really zeroes in on this one core issue. Money is losing its value so incredibly fast that comparing what you paid for something back in January to what you paid for something in June is just totally misleading. The numbers might look the same, but the actual value they represent, they're from different planets.
And what's really fascinating is that the standard doesn't just look at some abstract number. It looks at how people are actually behaving. It tells us we're in a crisis when people just stop trusting their own money. They dump it for anything real, physical assets or a stable foreign currency like the US dollar. And yeah, that last point, when the cumulative inflation rate over just 3 years hits 100%, that's the official big red flag.
So how on earth do you fix this kind of mess? Well, that brings us to Section 2 and kind of the hero of our story, International Accounting Standard 29. It's a set of rules designed specifically to fix that shrinking ruler problem and bring a little sanity back to the numbers.
Now, before we get into all the nitty-gritty details, the core idea behind it is actually beautiful in its simplicity. If your ruler keeps shrinking, you can't compare yesterday's measurement with today's. The only way to make them comparable is to remeasure everything using the ruler you have today. That's the entire philosophy right there.
And this right here is the key rule from the standard. It sounds a little technical, but what it's saying is really simple. Every single number on the financial report, no matter when it happened, has to be restated into the value of the currency on the day the report is published. It's all about converting everything into today's money.
Okay, so how do we actually do this? This is where the rubber meets the road. In this section, we're going to get practical. The standard basically splits everything a company owns and owes into two totally different buckets, and they get treated in completely different ways. So this is probably the most important thing to get. Monetary items are things like cash in the bank or a loan you have to pay back. You know, a dollar is a dollar. It's already in today's money, so you don't touch it. But non-monetary items, like a factory you bought 10 years ago for $1 million, that's a different story. That $1 million price tag was measured with an old, much longer ruler. It has to be restated to show what it's worth in today's much shorter currency. So how do you actually restate it? Well, the process is pretty logical. You take the original price of that factory. Then you look up a general price index, like a consumer price index, to see just how much prices have gone up since you bought it. You apply that inflation factor to the original price and boom, you've got the restated cost of that factory in today's money. Simple as that. All right, now we get to what I think is the most fascinating part of this whole thing. After you've gone through and done all these adjustments, IAS 29 makes you calculate something totally new, something that doesn't even exist in normal accounting. It's a line item that reveals the hidden truth of how inflation really hit the company's wealth. It's called the gain or loss on net monetary position. I know it sounds super complicated, right? But all it is a final calculation of whether holding cash and being in debt actually made you richer or poorer in terms of what your money can actually buy.
It's a direct measure of inflation's punch to your financial gut.
And this is where things get a little weird and counterintuitive. If you're holding on to a ton of cash, a monetary asset, inflation just destroys its value. You end up with a loss in purchasing power. But, and get this is the wild part, if you have a lot of debt, a monetary liability, you actually come out ahead. You gain. How is that possible? Well, think about it. The money you have to pay back later is worth way, way less than the money you borrowed. You're repaying a huge loan with cheap, devalued currency.
And what's really crucial here is that the standard says this isn't just some interesting number for a footnote. No way. This calculated gain or loss from inflation has to be reported directly on the income statement. It's considered a core part of the company's profit or loss for the year. It's real.
So let's bring it all home in our final section. Why go through all this trouble? I mean, why create this complicated set of rules? The answer is actually pretty simple. It's to restore trust and clarity when both are in really short supply.
The whole point of IAS 29 is to cut through all the noise and confusion of hyperinflation. It's about creating a financial statement that an investor or a manager or really anyone can look at and understand the true economic picture of the company, not one that's all twisted and distorted by a broken currency. And to make sure everyone trusts the numbers, the standard requires some specific disclosures. You have to say right up front, hey, we've applied these rules. You have to explain your methods, and you have to show exactly which price index you used to do your calculations. It's basically the accounting equivalent of showing your work in a math problem. It builds trust by making the whole process transparent and verifiable.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, IAS 29 isn't just about some obscure accounting rules. It's really about truth. It's about allowing for real, meaningful comparisons of a company's performance year after year. It gives leaders the info they need to make good decisions, especially in a crisis. And most importantly, it gives meaning back to financial reports that would otherwise be, well, completely useless.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought. We tend to think of money as this stable, solid thing, a given. But when it breaks, it shows us that even financial truth isn't a guarantee. It has to be carefully, logically reconstructed with a clear set of rules. It takes something like IAS 29 to pull understanding back out of the chaos.